What if humanity wasn't the beginning, but merely a distant echo of something much older? We believe we are unique, but perhaps we are merely fragments of a forgotten history. This idea sounds controversial because it challenges our vanity of being the first. However, Earth's silences seem more like torn pages than an absence of a plot. What has disappeared may be greater than anything we know. Just remember that even our personal memories are easily erased. A lost photo, a torn letter, a forgotten name are enough to erase centuries of family memories. Now imagine this on a planetary scale. Entire libraries of civilizations could have burned to the ground and disappeared. Perhaps the past is full of invisible chapters. What we see today may be just the remnants of a larger plot. The most disturbing thing is that we also leave traces that don't easily disappear. Pollution, nuclear waste, and plastics will be scars etched on the planet. If someone looks back in the future, they will find our marks, just as we search for those of yesterday. And this raises the inevitable question: if there were others before us, are we prepared to recognize the signs they left? There's something almost frightening when we think of deep time, this silent clock that governs Earth far beyond the human scale. Imagine billions of years as pages in a book so vast that our lives would be mere footnotes. In this process, almost everything is erased. Cities turn to dust, oceans swallow continents, and mountains rise and disappear like sandcastles. The Earth is a merciless archivist, rewriting its memories without asking permission, patiently erasing everything that seemed eternal to those who lived it. This is the nature of geology. It doesn't forgive fragile memories. For us, who barely comprehend 100 years of history, it's like trying to decipher a language that insists on fading as we read it. Perhaps the best image for this is that of a needle hidden in a library of 4 million books. Not only do we need to know which book to look for, but the needle may be on a single page that has already faded with time. This is the task of science when it tries to recover traces of the remote past, to find something almost invisible in an ocean of silence. And the curious thing is that the deeper we dig, the more we realize that the absence of records does not mean the absence of stories. On the contrary, the emptiness suggests entire chapters that we may never read. But does this mean these pages never existed, or simply that we have not yet learned to recognize their fragments? And here's a personal reflection. How often do our own memories slip away like sand through our fingers? Yellowed photos, forgotten letters, details we no longer quite remember. If within a single lifetime memories fade, why expect Earth's memory to be any different? Perhaps the planet bears its scars as we bear ours, some clear, some blurred, some completely erased. This leads us to believe that Earth's profound silence is not an absolute void, but an echo of what once was. And this echo, if listened to carefully, can lead us to the next enigma, the footprints that time tried to erase but failed to completely. Even in the face of the fury of geological time, some marks simply refuse to disappear. Consider fossil carbon, for example. It's as if the Earth had written in permanent ink on the pages of its history. Radioactive isotopes, left as discrete traces, act as chemical signatures of distant times. And more recently, plastic, that nearly immortal material we created, is already infiltrating rocks, sediments, and even the air we breathe. These are signs that no matter how much nature tries to erase them, certain traces remain, like small rebellions against oblivion. This leads us to imagine that, if something existed before us, perhaps it also left traces we still can't decipher. A good analogy would be that old linen tablecloth stored in the back of a closet. The fabric may change color, wear out, and become fragile over time, but a wine stain spilled at a dinner party long ago remains there, stubborn. No matter how many washes, it always returns, discreetly revealing that something happened that night. Such are industrial marks, invisible scars that survive millennia. What if there were other stains before ours? Perhaps they aren't identical to the ones we leave today, but who can guarantee that the Earth doesn't harbor residues from unknown industries, etched in layers of stone we haven't yet correctly interpreted? And here arises the uncomfortable question: were there ever civilizations so ancient that their traces have become invisible to the modern human eye? Perhaps the clues aren't buried skyscrapers or rusted spaceships, but subtle changes in the planet's chemistry. It's like walking into a room and noticing a scent in the air, even though the person has been gone for hours. The trail isn't obvious, but it's there, waiting to be recognized. And this thought opens a new possibility. If certain footprints have been erased, but not completely, what about the moments when life seemed to take giant leaps all at once? If we observe the timeline of life on Earth, we quickly realize that it doesn't follow a continuous, predictable line, but pulsates in moments of explosion that defy all logic. The most striking example is the Cambrian Explosion, which occurred some 540 million years ago and forever changed the course of evolution. During this period, in a tiny fraction of the geological scale, an enormous diversity of complex life forms emerged almost all at once, as if sprouting from nothing. Before that, life seemed timid, microscopic, almost invisible, like a blur on a blank canvas. Suddenly, creatures with eyes, shells, limbs, and intricate systems appeared, as if a new book had been opened before us. This leap baffles scientists because it defies the classical logic of gradualism, which expects slow, gentle changes, like cautious steps on a staircase. It's as if nature had remained silent for entire eons, only to, in an instant, scream with all its might in multiple directions at once. To better understand this question, imagine a writer who advances through his work, page by page, line by line, calmly and patiently. Suddenly, in the middle of a chapter still under construction, an entire volume emerges, complete with characters, dialogue, and settings, as if it had been inserted into the manuscript by surprise. Who would do this, if not an author who already had something stored away, hidden in a drawer, waiting just for the right moment to reveal it? Looking at the fossil record, it's inevitable to think that life may have worked the same way, revealing entire chapters in decisive moments. Perhaps it's not just blind chance, but a process we still don't understand, or even a forgotten intervention from intelligences we can no longer trace. Science seeks answers, but to this day, this enigma remains open, like a page torn from an old book. It is precisely in this gap that imagination flourishes, fueling bold hypotheses that raise more questions than certainties. And this provocation opens the door to even deeper reflections. Were these leaps simply the result of chemistry and physics working together? Or is there something else behind them that we haven't yet fully deciphered? Perhaps life is like a garden we inherited, already cultivated, full of flowers we never planted, but which someone before us sowed in silence. We can contemplate its beauty, but we don't know the hand that cultivated it, and this absence of an author causes unease. This feeling accompanies us when we look at the sudden transitions of evolution, which seem to hide more than they reveal. It's uncomfortable, but also fascinating, because it challenges our belief that everything happened by chance and without intention. What if these leaps conceal a choice, a conscious direction, a script already written before we even began reading it? This question provokes us, and even more so when we realize that after these leaps came the great extinctions, some of them so selective that they seem more like acts of editing than simple natural accidents. When we look at Earth's history, we realize that major mass extinctions were not just random catastrophes, but often selective events that changed the course of life. Dinosaurs, for example, dominated the planet for millions of years until they disappeared almost suddenly, leaving room for mammals to multiply. It's as if history itself made a conscious choice to wipe out an entire group to make room for another. Of course, science talks about asteroids, volcanism, and climate change, but the more intriguing question is the precision with which these events affected specific species. Does nature act blindly, or is there a hidden logic behind these decisions? The silence of the rocks holds secrets we still don't understand, but which suggest something beyond simple chance repeated over the ages. We can think of these extinctions as if they were edits on a computer. Imagine someone accessing a large file, and instead of deleting everything, carefully choosing only a few folders. Dinosaurs, for example, were erased, but crocodiles and turtles, which lived at the same time, remained untouched, as if they were off the exclusion list. Strange, isn't it? This selectivity suggests that life may be more complex than we imagine, almost as if fate were curating it. Perhaps we're looking at simple accidents, but it's inevitable that certain cuts seem intentional. And this sensation raises a provocative question: who or what would have their hand on the keyboard, deciding what should stay and what should go? This thought may seem uncomfortable, but that's precisely where its power lies. Because if life on Earth was shaped by selective extinctions, we can't rule out the possibility that some form of intelligence, natural or otherwise, was involved in this process. This isn't about talking about conspiracies, but about recognizing that patterns exist even in apparent chaos. We may be unable to understand it now, but the fossil record suggests that with each major cut, life begins anew in a different direction, like a book that changes genre mid-narrative. What if each extinction were less an accident and more a conscious edit? This provocation leads us to another fascinating point. What if there were once entire civilizations that were so completely erased that they became invisible to our modern eyes? When we talk about ancient civilizations, our minds quickly turn to stone ruins, buried temples, broken pottery, and monuments that stand the test of time. But is this the only way to think about the past? What if advanced cultures, much older than anything we know, had used technologies different from ours, based on materials that degrade too quickly? In that case, there would be nothing for us to find today, not even fragments. Think about our own world. Much of what we produce depends on plastic, silicon, and synthetic fibers. Now imagine what would remain 10,000 years from now if all our cities were abandoned. Perhaps almost nothing. What we call legacy could turn to dust, leaving only small chemical scars in the soil. If this could happen to us, why believe it didn't happen before, in even more ancient and mysterious eras? A good analogy for this is losing all your digital photos on a burned-out hard drive. You existed, lived stories, loved, traveled, built bonds, but suddenly all those memories disappear, as if they never happened. Of course, your life was real, but without records, who would believe your version of history? Perhaps it's exactly like that with civilizations that came before us. They may have flourished, developed science, created art forms, and reached a level of sophistication incomprehensible to us, but their traces have been erased by time. We look for pyramids, resistant metals, and stone tools, but what if the signs were in another form? Perhaps in materials that didn't survive, or in patterns we haven't yet recognized as the fruit of intelligence. This archaeological blindness may be the greatest obstacle to realizing that the past can be much denser than we imagine. And here comes the inevitable reflection. Perhaps the problem isn't the lack of evidence, but the type of evidence we insist on seeking. We continue to see copies of ourselves in the past, cities built of stone, colossal monuments, and enduring metal structures. But what if they weren't like us? What if their technological choices were cleaner, more integrated with nature, disappearing almost without a trace? History would still be there, but written in ink invisible to the modern eye. This thought forces us to expand our imagination and consider that perhaps there are layers of civilization hidden on Earth, invisible, because we expect to find only what we already know. And if this is the case, perhaps we are not only blind to the past, but also repeating the script of those who preceded us. What we see today may be merely a reflection of ancient echoes. Sometimes the most disturbing thing is realizing that we are repeating an old script. The signs we leave are unmistakable. CO2 accumulating in the atmosphere creates a curve that never fades. Plastics infiltrate soil, rivers, and the seabed. Nuclear waste promises to haunt millennia to come. All of this acts like chemical scars etched into the crust. Future geologists will read these marks as we read fossils. The intriguing thing is that ancient layers show similar variations. They are echoes that recall our own technological footprint. The mirror of time gives us an uncomfortable image. Maybe we are not new, just continuity. Imagine identical scars on the bodies of people who have never met. The similarity creates a silent and strange kinship. In geology, this kinship appears in carbon signatures. Sudden changes in ocean chemistry repeat patterns. Curious deposits emerge as footnotes from the past. We don't know who wrote them, but the handwriting is familiar to us. We look for unique causes and receive recurring responses. It's like listening to an old song with new instruments. The melody, however, is surprisingly the same. This hurts our belief in absolute originality, and it begs the question, are we just retracing steps? This thought is uncomfortable, but valuable. It dismantles the vanity of being the first great civilization. Accepting the mirror makes us more humble and attentive. If patterns repeat themselves, errors can also return. Our current choices may echo forgotten decisions. The earth keeps memory, but speaks in chemical metaphors. Those who do not learn to read repeat history in the dark. We need to record better and act more carefully. Otherwise, we will just become another suspicious layer, a brief note between eras that do not speak to each other. And that brings us to the most fragile point, our own memory. If we reflect on the future, we realize how our cities, so grand today, could disappear in a few generations, leaving almost nothing. Iron structures would rust, concrete buildings would crumble, and in 1,000 years, everything could be covered in forests. This fragility shows us that humanity's material memory is less solid than we imagine. Think of entire libraries that have been lost in fires, taking with them centuries of knowledge. Now expand this idea to the entire planet. What if our own civilization was swallowed by time? What would remain of us? The uncomfortable feeling is imagining that, despite our technology, we could be forgotten like so many other cultures that believed in their eternity and today are nothing more than fragmented ruins scattered across the earth. A personal analogy can help visualize this. If you stopped writing your story, in a few generations no one would remember who you were. A photo forgotten in a drawer, a torn letter, a name that no longer makes sense to your great-grandchildren. The same is true of humanity. Our writing is fragile, our memory is flawed, and our voice can be lost in the noise of time. Even great empires, once seemingly indestructible, have become footnotes in history books. Rome, Egypt, Sumeria, they all left legacies, but only fragments compared to what they truly experienced. If this happened to them, why should it be any different for us? This thought puts our vulnerability into perspective and forces us to reflect on the importance of better recording who we are. This idea opens the door to something even more profound. What if we are nothing more than a forgotten memory of something greater? Perhaps we are like loose pages in a book that once had many previous chapters, now scattered and erased. This possibility doesn't diminish us, but rather broadens our view of time and our position within it. The discomfort lies in imagining that our history, so detailed to us, may be just a distant echo a few million years from now. This provocation connects us directly to the next reflection. If our memory is so fragile, perhaps previous civilizations left hidden messages for those who came after, like bottles thrown into the sea of time, waiting for some future reader to discover their secrets. There's a fascinating idea. Perhaps previous civilizations left hidden messages, intended not for their present, but for those who came after. It's like someone writing a letter and putting it in a bottle, knowing it won't be found until much later, perhaps by entirely different people. This kind of invisible legacy could be before us in forms we can't interpret. Cryptic inscriptions, mathematical patterns in nature, or even unusual geological structures could carry hidden information. The problem is, we can only see what we already know. Just as a child doesn't understand a mathematical formula, we may also be unable to decipher the language used to record such messages. The legacy may exist, but it remains invisible. A good analogy is to think of a buried safe without a key or manual. You can find it, touch its surface, recognize that there's something inside, but you can't access the contents. Perhaps this is the case with many mysteries humanity faces to this day. Monuments that appear to be simple rocks can hide intentional geometries. Symbolic texts we treat as legends may be historical records. Even some cosmic anomalies could carry traces of intelligence. If we are indeed receiving signals, we may not be ready to read them. The invisible legacy is not the absence of a message, but our inability to translate the language in which it was written. And this radically changes our relationship with the past. This reflection invites us to look more broadly. Perhaps we are not the first to think about the future. Perhaps we are just another link in a long, silent chain. The discomfort lies in accepting that our own message for tomorrow may also be lost or misinterpreted, just as may have happened to those who came before. But if we stop to listen more carefully, perhaps we are already surrounded by signs. What is missing is humility and a willingness to see beyond the obvious. And this is where the loop opens to the conclusion. If there are invisible legacies scattered across Earth and the cosmos, the real question is not only whether they exist, but whether we will be able to recognize them before our own history becomes just another message forgotten in the depths of time. If there's a lesson in all this, it's that the world's memory is fragile and at the same time powerful. Nothing guarantees we'll be remembered, but everything indicates we'll leave marks, even if subtle. It's up to us to choose whether these marks will be signs of destruction or testaments to wisdom. Time is unforgiving, but it always returns echoes to those who know how to listen. And you, have you ever stopped to think about the traces you're leaving? Is your life being written on pages that endure or on paper that easily crumbles? Asking yourself this is to face your own responsibility of not being just a forgotten fragment. History is made not only of what survives, but also of what we choose to record. And perhaps the biggest mistake is to believe that nothing is lost. So don't let this reflection end here. Share in the comments which part of this journey touched you most. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue exploring the greatest mysteries of existence. After all, understanding the universe is also understanding yourself. And who knows, by reflecting together, we might become a legacy truly worth remembering.